power remains untamed. Wildfire burns in every corner of the globe, unchecked by modern science. In the last decade, over 1 billion acres have been consumed. Now, wildfire is attacking our cities, bringing us face to face with a terrifying force of nature in a battle we can never win. Late summer 1998, and fire breaks out in the hills east of Los Angeles. Driven by strong winds, it takes hold in isolated canyons. 26,000 acres are consumed within hours, and nearby towns are soon in danger. 1,000 firefighters are mobilized. Its most familiar home is in the forest, but wildfire will also spread at terrifying speed wherever there is grassland or brush. Water is useless over these large areas. Instead, the firefighters race to surround and contain the fire. They look for landscape features to use as fire breaks, and the highway is ideal.
That's the main fire. From our position, we're looking east, and the fire is, they're going to attempt to hold the fire on this road here. Everyone wants to hold Highway 60. That's the plan A right now.
Anthony Escobar is in charge of a hotshot crew, the firefighting equivalent of the US Marines. They are highly experienced and highly motivated, but rarely attack a fire head-on. With the flames just 300 yards away, they prepare to fight fire with fire.
Once it gets close, then that's where the hotshot crews will drag fire this way along the freeway.
The technique is called backfiring. The principle is simple. Where the ground has burned, it won't burn again. Once the fire is surrounded by fire breaks, it will burn itself out.
You can hear the pops in the background. I'm going to be using the pistol to get a little bit more distance where the terrain is a little inaccessible, or we don't want to put people up there to get the depth. We will fire incendiary rounds up the hill.
Backfiring is one of many tactics designed to keep firefighters out of harm's way. The hotshot crews are on the front line, and wherever there is fire, there is risk. Many firefighters are attracted by the danger and excitement, but safety is the top priority for those in command. Their caution is built on years of experience and knowledge of the disasters of the past. Today, the fire is kept safely at arm's length.
They're in the right place. They've got plenty of time to get there and get that burnt before it hits the road.
The backfiring takes effect, and the line along the highway looks like it will hold. But wildfire can change direction with any sudden shift in the wind. Surrounding it can take days. A mile away, crews are engaged in the backbreaking side of the job. This is line construction, building fire breaks with hand tools. The safe and laborious methods don't seem to square with the heroic image of the firefighter. But the history of wildfire is littered with tragedy. Over the years, hundreds of firefighters have been trapped by the unpredictable flames. The lessons have been learned the hard way. Every 6th of July since 1994, the small town of Glenwood Springs in Colorado has witnessed a simple, silent reminder of a catastrophe that shook the world of firefighting and the American nation. In the space of half an hour, 14 firefighters were overrun by fire in the hills above the town. The site of the tragedy has become a byword for firefighting heroism and sacrifice. Storm King Mountain. On this steep and difficult terrain, firefighters made the fatal mistake of straying too far from safety. Brad Howe is one of only 3 men to witness the last desperate moments on this ridge and survive.
I don't know why I got out or how I got out. Luck, grace of God, good karma. I'm trying not to question it because one question leads to another and you can drive yourself crazy like that.
Crosses mark the spot, 50 feet below the ridge, where the first victims fell.
You never think it's going to happen to you. And we were very quickly thrown into a situation where it was happening to us. We thought we had a real good game plan, and under normal conditions, it probably would have worked just fine. We just got in a situation where things were drier than we thought, the winds were stronger than we thought, and the fire exploded much more violently than anyone had ever imagined.
In the early summer of 1994, there were dozens of fires in the Central Rockies. On July the 2nd, a new fire broke out near Glenwood Springs. Like the others, it was started by lightning. For 2 days, the fire burned slowly near Storm King Mountain. With much larger fires in the area, this one was a low priority. But in the nearby town, alarm was growing as smoke filled the skies. Residents like Paul Amershauer feared the worst.
I built the RV park, I built these houses, and I could just imagine them going. And that was the big worry. We didn't know what was going to happen. I slept with my clothes on, and I had my Jeep out in front of the house, aimed downhill with the keys in it.
On the 3rd day, July the 4th, aerial observers put the fire at only a few acres, but residents were frightened enough to abandon their homes.
When I was evacuated to the mall, I just stayed down there with the cat and just paced back and forth, you know, just having a nervous fit, because I just knew it was going to go.
By the end of the following day, the fire had spread to 50 acres. Residents urged the authorities to act. As other fires in the area came under control, more firefighters were assigned to Storm King Mountain.
We approached this fire like we would any other fire. We got in and we kicked its ass as best we could.
Brad Howe was in one of the several fire crews that began the difficult hike. At first, things were routine.
Looked pretty much like it was just going to be an ugly, creeping fire that is hard to catch, always moving. Slow, a lot of hard work, a lot of line construction. But we thought we had a pretty good plan and we implemented it.
The firefighters were just below a ridge, halfway up the mountain. But on the rocky slopes, it was hard to move anywhere fast, and strong winds were predicted for the next day, the 6th of July. Wind changes everything. In a matter of moments, a routine fire can blow out of control. Stronger winds duly arrived at lunchtime on the 6th. They funneled through the narrow canyons around Storm King Mountain, catching sparks and embers from the fire, and igniting the hillside opposite the firefighters.
When it was a quarter of a mile away on the other ridge and moving to the north, it was pretty neat. It was pretty exciting. It was a big fire, probably the biggest, fastest moving fire I'd ever seen. But when it jumped the drainage and started coming up our side, everything changed.
Now the fire was directly below them, and the tragedy entered its final act. 200-foot flames were racing up the slope. The firefighters were trapped.
Once I heard it, I knew in my soul that the only way out was to run for the ridge. At that point, we had a very brief discussion down off the ridge a little bit, I suggested we run. Some people talked about shelters. And at that point, I turned and ran.
It's a basic rule of firefighting. You can't outrun a fire uphill. Fire defies gravity, moving faster uphill than down. Brad Howe knew he was in a race for his life.
I'm not a very fast runner, and I was amazed that I was running as fast as I was. And I remember telling myself that if I tripped, I would probably die. So that was quite a motivator. It was really damn hot. I was almost afraid to take that last breath of air and to break over the ridge. But I think it was purely a survival instinct that kicked in. Things happened way too fast.
The fire blasted to the ridge only moments after Brad dived over. He scrambled down the other side, alive.
It worked. It doesn't always work, it won't always work, but this is one case where breaking the rules did work.
Only 2 other firefighters made it to the ridge. 14 men and women were overrun and killed. In a situation where fire could explode out of control, they were caught without escape routes. Brad Howe is left to ponder the split-second decision that saved his life. And for firefighting technology, a vital issue comes center stage. American firefighters carry a shelter, an aluminium tent to be used when the only option is to ride out the flames. In training, they have 30 seconds to unpack the shelter and press themselves flat to the ground. But when fire blows up, there isn't always time. On Storm King Mountain, some decided to use their shelters rather than run for the ridge. 2 men managed to get fully inside, but neither survived. One was Roger Roth. Designing a shelter that could have saved him became the life's work of his brother, Jim.
All it takes is to save one life. If we can just save one life with a better fire shelter, I'll be happy.
With his brother's death, Jim Roth became part of a science that turns forests into giant fire laboratories.
Peugeot 206.
Next. Nope, they're not right together. Next. What we need is a combination of...
There's no combination like Fruitful, succulent tropical fruits, nuts, and lightly sweetened mini shredded wheats. A terrific taste to seduce even the most jaded taste buds.
Now that's the perfect combination.
What?
Mini shredded wheats and fruit.
Fruitful from shredded wheat. Perfect partners. Terrific taste.
One of these musicians was suffering from diarrhea. But thanks to new chewable Imodium Plus, it didn't upset his day. Just 1 dose works with your body to stop diarrhea and all its unpleasant symptoms, quickly and gently restoring your normal rhythm. New Imodium Plus, fast, gentle diarrhea relief.
You know, I can still remember the very first sweets given to me by my grandfather. They were Werther's Original, and I was just a boy. I'll never forget that first taste. Sweet and creamy and uncommonly good. I remember feeling I must be someone very special when my granddad gave me his wonderful butter candy. Now I'm the granddad. And what else would I give my grandson but my Werther's Original? He's someone very special too, you know.
This is Paolo. He designs the new sofas for DFS. Paolo, you must love your designs.
Of course.
Me too, especially this sofa with removable and washable covers.
I know, but why you sell for just $4.99?
And this leather 3-seater sofa for just $5.49. How do you do it?
Because I'm amazing.
That's right. And every DFS design comes
I
with...
know, 4 years free credit, free for a year. But, Julie, your eyes, they sparkle like the stars.
Hello. I buy cotton for Olivia because it's soft, it's natural, it breathes. In the summer it's cool, in the winter it's warm. I never thought I'd get a nappy like cotton.
Introducing new Pampers Premium's Cotton-like. Soft, breathable and comfortable for baby like cotton.
It feels like her clothes. We've got the best of both worlds, the dryness and the softness put together. Head to toe, she's in cotton. When she's comfortable, the personality's completely different. She'll move a lot more. You can't imagine a 9-month baby to be able to say, I'm not wearing that. But she does. She's just like her mum, she's stubborn.
New Pampers Premium's Cotton-like. The comfort of cotton, the dryness of Pampers.
Radian B helps relieve muscular aches and pains.
July 1998, in Canada's remote Northwest Territories, the site of one of the most ambitious scientific projects in the world. In these neatly prepared rectangles of pine forest, wildfire will be let loose. Scientists have been preparing for months for the chance to observe fire in a unique forest laboratory. Among those lining the trees with sophisticated equipment is a man with a more personal mission. For aeronautical engineer Jim Roth, this is a quest to bring hope from tragedy. The death of his brother Roger on Storm King Mountain.
Had a nice clearing up here. When my brother died, I took a look at the current fire shelter materials and realized that nothing had been done for quite some time to push the state-of-the-art in thermal insulating materials. And I was really mad at myself that I didn't take the cue from my brother when he was still alive, look into the design of these materials, and come up with something better, something that maybe could have saved his life.
The challenge Jim has set himself is immense. His fire shelter will have to keep a human being alive in the worst conditions. With years of engineering experience, Jim knows which materials can withstand intense heat. His shelter uses layers of materials borrowed from the space race.
Just like perhaps your grandmother would tell you to insulate yourself against the cold, you wear multiple garments. Well, you can insulate yourself from heat and high-temperature flames the same way.
The key feature is the outer layer of fiberglass, which can withstand direct flames. Underneath are reflecting layers of aluminium and more fiberglass. An aerodynamic shape smooths the flow of hot air over the shelter, keeping the temperature down inside. But today, only electronics will feel the heat. Alongside Jim's shelter are competing designs. Recording the conditions is critical. Jim uses a total of 5 video cameras. But they will survive only inside specially made water-cooled cases. In the heart of the blaze, there is a good chance that the shelter will be completely destroyed. But if it can remain intact here, then just outside the forest, it will give a firefighter a good chance of survival. This is the kind of clear space where a shelter will be used in action. The experiment will determine the safe distance from the trees and the best kinds of protective clothing. Conditions are perfect, and only last-minute adjustments remain. The scientists retreat to their viewing positions. A light wind is blowing in just the right direction to carry the fire straight through the trees. The final countdown begins. For the ghostly figures on the edge of the forest, the contribution to firefighting science will be measured in degrees of destruction. "300 yards away on the other side of the trees, they start the experiment. In seconds, the flames reach the forest canopy. Anyone inside the forest would now have only moments to escape. The approaching blaze sucks in the surrounding air, and the fire becomes an all-consuming tidal wave. Once it's rolling, there's nothing to stop it until it runs out of forest. The fire moves so fast that the worst conditions for the shelter will last only 15 seconds. But in that time, the forest temperature reaches 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit. In less than 5 minutes, the storm bursts all the way through the forest. The fire creates its own wind, gusting at 50 miles per hour. With 10,000 pine trees over 5.5 acres reduced to ashes, the fire burns itself to a standstill. Scientists must wait more than 20 minutes for the forest to cool before venturing inside. But for Jim Roth, days like this will always be more than just an experiment.
No matter how many times I see one of these wildfires, I can't help but think how my brother felt in the final seconds of his life. And I feel sad. But I think that what we're doing here is going to help save other lives.
Some of the shelters are destroyed. But amid the blackened ruins, Jim's shelter appears relatively untouched. And on closer inspection, he makes a remarkable discovery. The ground underneath is still damp.
We've got green fuel underneath the fire shelter area, and the fabric under the side of the tent. You can see that the fire is burned up to and under the floor a little bit, but where a person would be laying with his weight on the floor. That sealed the environment for him. And underneath the fire shelter inside, it looks just like new, so I don't see any problems.
Jim Roth's shelter has passed the toughest examination. The outcome leaves him in no doubt. Just beyond the trees, where a firefighter would use a shelter in action, his new design offers a real chance of survival. Research moves on, but technology alone will never guarantee safety, because wildfire is on the rampage. In the last 20 years, fires have been getting bigger and more deadly, and firefighting itself is part of the cause.
Hello, folks. Do you remember? Look down that lone...
Smokey Bear made his first appearance in 50s America, the smiling face of an all-out campaign against the fire menace.
Help prevent forest fires. Yeah.
Smokey urged the public to stamp out forest fire wherever it was found.
That match clipper. Break it.
Now let's see what might happen when carelessness goes undetected.
Preventing fires was meant to preserve America's national parks.
Yes, another forest completely destroyed.
Many forests had no fire at all for decades, but the campaign may have gone too far.
Remember, only you can prevent forest fires.
This pine forest near Fort Providence in Canada has not burned for more than 60 years. As time goes by, a really dangerous fire becomes more likely. Fire ecologists like Marty Alexander are finding out why.
The jack pine forest here is composed of several different fuel layers, and probably one of the most important is this organic or duff layer. It's taken about 65 years to basically build up to about 5 centimeters in depth.
The duff layer of dead leaves and twigs would normally burn away. But if natural fire is prevented, the duff layer builds up. When fire eventually comes, it climbs towards the treetops and more unburned wood.
The next aspect of the fuel complex to look at are what we call ladder fuels. This is really ragged material. It's got a lot of surface area to it, and it catches at the bottom due to the surface fire, and it just works its way right on up, and it'll candle right to the top.
Once fire reaches the treetops, the wind catches it, and the fire spreads horizontally. In the dense forest canopy, it can jump easily from tree to tree. Driven by the wind, the speed of the fire doubles or even triples. This is crown fire, forest fire at its most deadly, thundering through the trees at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. In 1983, crown fire hit the southern hemisphere. The worst fires in Australian history swept through more than 500,000 acres and took 76 lives. They began on February the 16th, Ash Wednesday. Conditions were extreme. Southern Australia was in the middle of a long drought. Some forests had not burned in 100 years and were thick with dry fuel. With the scene set for crown fire, winds swelled to gale force. Nearly 200 separate fires sparked in the intense heat of the Australian summer. In the huge expanse of grassland and forest, the fires raced out of control. Nearly 3,000 homes were lost. From the heart of the blaze came the voice of radio journalist Murray Nicol.
I'm watching my house burn down. I'm sitting out on the road in front of my own house where I've lived for 13 or 14 years. And it's going down in front of me. The roof is falling in. It's in flames, and there's nothing I can do about it. Absolutely nothing. And the flames are in the roof, and it's just beyond belief. My own house, and everything around it's black. There are fires burning all around me, all around me.
Australia's Ash Wednesday was a tragic reminder that fire plays an essential role in nature.
We'll have 31, engine 31, engine 32.
In recent years, experts have come to recognize the need for fire.
The firing operation.
Since 1900, wildfire in America has been reduced by almost 90%. Huge areas haven't burned for decades. 1 hour's drive from Los Angeles, firefighters attempt to restore the balance of nature. This is controlled burning. California has one of the worst wildfire problems in America. The deliberate burning of 50,000 acres per year is a scientific solution. It reintroduces small-scale fire to the ecosystem, regenerating plants and trees, and restoring habitats. And it offers firefighters safe lines to defend if wildfire does break out. But as always, there are risks. The managers of this burn watch the weather and the fire's movements. Even a controlled fire can flare up if conditions change.
4 to 5 from the southwest with gusts to 7.
Only a few dozen acres have burned, but with houses nearby, the threat of wind makes the risks too great. They call a halt to the fire. The need for safety means that progress is slow. Some of the most volatile areas of California will still be untreated well into the 21st century. In the meantime, all the ingredients for disaster remain. Those who live here need some form of defense. In November 1993, the hills above Malibu, California, erupted in a firestorm. It was Santa Ana season, when blistering dry winds blow in from the Sierra Nevada mountains. Fire crews were overwhelmed, and as houses were consumed, evacuations began. Not everyone wanted to leave. In spite of the danger, Elizabeth Ewing decided to fight for her home.
The police and fire department helicopters were overhead telling me to evacuate immediately. And I just pretended like I didn't hear them because I felt the only way that I had a chance of saving my house is if I stayed there.
Her husband was cut off by the fire and couldn't help. The flames were already closing in on her house, just 5 miles outside Malibu.
Although I did have the truck packed and ready to go, I thought if the house starts to burn, there's nothing I can do to save it, then I'll leave. But until I see some flames actually coming out of the house, I'm not going anywhere.
Fire crews were being diverted to defend Malibu itself, and many homes were defenseless. Elizabeth put her faith in groundbreaking technology. Inventors Dennis Smagach and John Breedlove had been testing a protection system that homeowners could use themselves when firefighters are stretched to breaking point and water is scarce. By adding a foaming agent, they multiplied the available water by 5. Water by itself forms droplets and quickly runs off surfaces. Foam has the same wetting and cooling effect, but gives far more protection because it congeals and sticks. The Malibu firestorm seemed the perfect chance to test it for real. But as they neared Elizabeth's home, doubts set in.
Once we arrived, the fire had jumped about 4 miles as the crow flies. So we were under extreme conditions and we had very small amount of time to work with.
They told me, we don't know if this is going to work, but let's give it a try. And they were concerned that it was going to stain the paint on my house. And I said, you know, I'm not going to sign a waiver for you guys. It can take all the paint off the house for all I care.
Driven by 60-mile-per-hour winds, a wave of fire rolled across the surrounding hills. Elizabeth's neighborhood was being destroyed.
It went down the ridge and jumped the road and started coming up our road.
With escape cut off, they were left with one hope. After a few frantic minutes covering the exposed parts of the house with foam, they shut themselves in. If the foam didn't work, they would almost certainly die.
Fire was now at the edge of my property.
In tests, Dennis and John tried hard to create realistic conditions. 2 structures, one protected by foam, faced a small but intense fire. Powerful fans drove a sheet of flame onto exposed walls. The foam offered some protection. But no one knew what would happen in a full-blown firestorm or how long the protection would last.
We were inside the house, 5 seconds, and about a 60-foot wall of flame came up on the driveway side of the structure and literally went over the building itself that we had foamed in the surrounding vegetation.
You're too busy to be frightened. We were just so busy. I was running around wetting everything that I could, and I said, "What do we do now, Dennis?" And he said, "We pray."
We made our peace because at one point in time, we didn't know if we were going to make it or not.
I didn't know if it would take all the air and that I wouldn't be able to breathe, and that was of concern to me. What if it sucks all the air out of the house and we suffocate?
All you see when you look out window is flame. We have to scream at each other literally to hear ourselves not 5 or 10 feet away because of the sound of the firestorm itself.
Deserted homes nearby burned to the ground. Elizabeth's survived.
Everything around us has burned, but we're fine. I didn't get emotional till the next day when my husband came home, because I didn't know if he was alive. I knew that he was driving up the canyon, and I thought he may have been trapped by the fire. And when I knew he was alive, I finally was able to release this emotion, and I was just so thankful to see him.
New technology saved their lives. Where flames met foam, the walls beneath were intact. Saving a single home is possible. Saving thousands is another matter. In Oakland, California in 1991, a nightmare came true. Wildfire in the heart of the city.
My God, I've never seen anything like that!
Mom, where's the microchips? I'm starving. In the freezer. I can't find it. Well, that's something else.
Hiya, did you get far? Did you have a nice time? Oh, sound, yeah. What was the weather like?
McCain microchips. Even more satisfying than getting one over on your brother. McCain, you just can't help yourself.
Absolutely torrential rain, the wettest month on record, truly appalling, and if you're stuck up...
Heavy showers expected in the east all afternoon, and tonight further showers spreading across towards the west.
Skin, I mean, what is going on? Can somebody...
If you buy a gleaming new Mitsubishi Charisma before the end of February, in 6 months' time we'll replace it, absolutely free, with a gleaming new Mitsubishi Charisma.
Might be an idea to give that a bit of a clean.
No. When it gets dirty, I just get a new one.
The Mitsubishi Charisma. Buy one, get one free.
Oh, have one of these. New Kleenex for men. Ooh, what's a new soft weave got to do with men? Well, they're more soft. Oh, they're really strong. And they're much thicker. And they're easy to pick up.
Kleenex for men tissues with a new soft weave. Now softer and thicker than ever.
Shredded wheat is 100% whole wheat. No added salt or sugar. Made for life. Shredded wheat. Made for life.
Hey, check this out. It's the new Nice and Easy from Clairol. Now the conditioner travels with the color inside the hair in a rich conditioning color cream. So you get color that's absolutely fabulous. Stop that, sweetie. Yeah.
New Nice and Easy Rich Conditioning Color from Clairol.
Right, Puppy Patrol, pay attention. Lots more soft tissue has been added to every sheet of Andrex for a new bouncy softness. And to demonstrate, we've got a volunteer. Well done, lad. And hang on, where have they gone? Oh, well, at least they enjoy their work. Get your paws on new bouncy soft Andrex.
The Royal Mail Millennium Collection. Each month, 4 new stamps created by leading artists build into a fantastic record of key events of the past 1,000 years.
Huh. They must have used very small brushes.
To order yours, phone 0845 071 2000.
No one wanted to stay with a woman like you, did they?
We're gonna let them get away with it. A fight for justice on A Wing and a Prayer at the new time of Sunday, 10:50 on 5.
Tony Acosta works in the major problem area of modern fire control. Here in the steep hills of Northern California, vegetation has built up to dangerous levels. Measures like controlled burning are risky, with millions of people living in a few square miles of heavily wooded land. Acosta's home city of Oakland is a tinderbox, and much of the problem is man-made.
Approximately 80 years ago, some real estate developers got a wonderful idea that they could sell the property up here much better if it contained a forest, and so they literally planted hundreds of thousands of trees, Monterey pine, Monterey cypress, and particularly the blue gum eucalyptus imported from Australia. Unfortunately, all of those species of trees I've mentioned are very flammable.
Eucalyptus trees are the most dangerous. The lower limbs hug the ground where fire can reach them, and its dry, shaggy bark ignites easily. The long, hanging leaves burn like upturned matches. They carry the flames quickly up to the crowns, producing a high-intensity fire in seconds. Around 20% of a eucalyptus tree's weight is oil. Even if it has plenty of moisture, like this one, it will still burn. When it's dry, eucalyptus burns like a firework. The tree has one more deadly trait. The burning leaves are the perfect shape to be carried hundreds of yards on the wind. With thousands of trees like this, the fires are devastating. In Oakland, the fire season reaches its peak in October. A scorching dry wind known as the Diablo blows into the city from the east. In the suburban hills, shading trees provide some relief, but terrible risk. In 1991, a long hot summer had dragged on into drought. Trees were tinder dry. For weeks, minor fires have been handled by the fire department, but October the 20th was different. Late that morning, a spark from a smouldering fire was caught by the wind, and the disaster was underway. As fire crews fought in vain, the wind picked up, and burning embers carried the fire in all directions. An apartment block was among the first casualties. Residents fled in panic. Across the interstate highway, Oakland resident Jim Peer captured the events on videotape.
I picked up the camera as soon as I saw the smoke because I thought another grass fire, and this one looks like a big one, so I'm gonna go make some videotape for my mother, show her what fires are like in this state. And there was a column of smoke covering about 2/3 of my field of view, just rising up in front of me. And I knew that something was wrong.
Station 18, hang up your phone. Station 18, hang up fire department.
Fire department switchboards were jammed. But this wasn't a normal urban fire. Even wildfire tactics weren't working.
What we needed to do is make fire breaks. Well, we thought we had a natural fire break coming up, which was the freeway system, and that was 6-8 lanes of paved concrete and asphalt. So that should probably be a good stop. Well, it jumped that in 13 spots.
The wooden homes on the other side of the freeway added more fuel to the flames. Sensing catastrophe, Jim Peer kept his camera running.
This is how they start. What do you do? Well, as little fires continue to start all around, the big ones rage.
I never thought that the fire would make it to this neighborhood, but the winds were very strong that day, and ambers were blowing great distances, and just suddenly there was a fire up the street here.
Heading toward my house. I think, well, first, oh, look.
What's that, man? Is there about to blow in the hole?
There's no water.
No water?
Here's a fire starting. In a little while, I suppose this house will be engulfed.
By the end of the first hour, 800 houses had been consumed. Even evacuation was dangerous. Residents faced a stark choice: gather a few belongings and struggle through the chaos, or stay behind to defend their homes. Craig and Linda Buxton decided to fight. These days, the couple have moved to the shore, and all that remains of their previous home is a box of fire-damaged relics.
It was just black. You really couldn't see much. But as we were looking, cinders started falling. And it was almost like a rainfall, slowly starting of all these live cinders. I'd seen fire in houses that were maybe half a mile away. And I knew then, wait a minute, this is not on the other side of the freeway. It's our side. Every second seemed to be another piece of some geography or land or house, trees, catching on fire.
I remember hosing down the house, desperately trying to keep all the wood wet and myself, because every 30 seconds, my clothes would catch on fire. And so I was trying to do that, and I was worried about Craig being on the roof.
I also was noticing houses blowing up now. Not just catching on fire, but literally blowing up. I was still trying to get stuff off the roof when I realized that there was something in the air. Within a very short period of time, this loud noise.
I saw this huge wall of fire, maybe 30, 50 feet tall, coming right near the house, just as fast as you can imagine.
I started losing my breath, and I saw this line of fire, and it was just like a wind, and I just went, it knocked me down.
At that moment, I knew that we had lost the fight. It was time to get out, or we wouldn't make it.
All I can remember was she kept saying, "Where do we go?" And I thought, I don't know, I don't know.
878, we'll be right there. 988-20th.
The situation was far beyond the resources of any urban fire department. Fires were being reported from all sides. And by late afternoon, more than 2 square miles of Oakland were on fire. Reinforcements arrived from nearby San Francisco and Berkeley. It takes 2 engines to put out a house fire. 360 engines were available, catching fire every 10 seconds. As day turned to night, it was clear that wildfire had engulfed a whole city.
One of the things that we needed to do was get a damage assessment, you know, how bad was it and where was the fire going. And one of the resources that we had called in was the California Highway Patrol with their helicopter. And I remember talking to him on the radio, and I said, Ray, you know, how many homes do you estimate? And he said hundreds, maybe 400 or 500. And I said, no, I'm talking homes. How many homes are on fire? And he repeated, homes. He said, I cannot believe what I'm seeing.
Even experienced firefighters were overwhelmed by the speed of the flames. Officer Mike Dolan and his partner went to save a house and ended up saving their own lives in the swimming pool.
I started the pump, and I looked to my left, and over to about 100 yards to my left, I could see the fire coming down the hill. And when fire burns down the hill, you'll feel relatively safe. I also noticed that there was a house there, and in one corner of the house on a roof that had a bunch of pine needles, and they were just starting to catch on fire. And I reached for a valve, and I felt there was just a big blast of heat. I kind of like hunched over, and I looked up, and the tree was completely on fire. And I looked back to my left, and the fire had swept past us. The house that had the pine needles in the one corner was on fire. Fire was coming out all the windows. It was at this time I decided probably the safest place would be refuge in the swimming pool. And the whole front of her house just blew. It was just a big explosion. Glass cracking, breaking, and Steve turned around, took 2 steps, and he was in the swimming pool with me. It just got unbelievably dark. And I just looked at Steve, and I told him, he was like looking around and assessing the situation like I was, and I told him, hey, I don't think we're gonna make it. You could see this orange flame right on top of the cover, about a foot away from our heads. And we continually splashed water to keep it from melting. It kept getting darker and darker and darker, and we started hearing explosions. And you could hear ba-boom, ba-boom, and it was frightening.
As the night wore on, firefighters faced a chilling truth. The fire looked like it could burn for days, and they had no way to stop it.
Now we're in a second day, and say we're at 3,000 homes, and we'll let it go another day. Now we're at 4,000 homes. You know, at some point, you're going to have to say, well, how do we stop this? You know, we can't turn off the wind. It's not a wind machine. And then people would want to wait it out. Now it's, say, the 4th day. Now we're up to 4,000, 5,000 homes.
Fire chiefs began to think the unthinkable. Unless the wind died down, the only hope was to build huge fire breaks, a desperate measure in a modern city.
At some point, you're going to have to say, okay, let's go step back to a major thoroughfare somewhere in the city and start tearing down homes.
Firefighters considered using bulldozers and dynamite, fearing the fire might burn all the way to San Francisco Bay. But as dawn broke on the second day, nature gave them a break.
Rather than having horizontal flames, they just went to vertical flames. And it stopped right in the middle of clumps of eucalyptus trees, and we were able to get a handle on it. If those winds and conditions had not subsided, we'd still be fighting it now.
Survivors emerged to find their world in ruins. 4,000 homes had burned to the ground. The wheels of cars had melted into pools of metal. Concrete foundations were cracked wide open.
This was one of the most beautiful neighborhoods you'd ever see. Strange across the street. While the place was burning, that was so unreal that it didn't seem to really hit home until the following morning when I could see by the light of day that everything was absolutely devastated.
The fire killed 25 people and caused $1.5 billion worth of damage. Years later, the scars are still evident. Oakland was the most destructive fire in American history. Its causes seem clear. Fire is a natural force. Where there is land that can burn, sooner or later it will. When people choose to live in these areas and build homes of wood, the price of seclusion can be fatally high. Many people believe Oakland will burn again, and there are cities like Oakland all over the world. As they grow and people seek escape in the wooded hills, they move into nature's domain, the domain of fire.
Well, that show has taken over from Wing and a Prayer, which you can now see on Sunday nights from 10:50. Another Into the Flames next Wednesday at 8.
Acid, and our deadliest foe.